What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's time. As you can see, I've got my collection of toilet paper here. Y'all ain't getting none of it. Hopefully you can hear me okay right now. I'm trying a little something different with a little bit of ambiance in the background. As you can tell, the world is burning not too far from here. The coronavirus has pretty much taken over society, and the only people left are the ones who prepared a little bit. But someone let me know how the sound's working, if you don't mind, in the comments before I actually legitimately get started. What's going on, everybody? Looks like everything's good. Everybody's laughing. I guess the sound's working good. If it's not working good, let me know. I think I know what might mess it up. So if it's not working good, let me know. Yeah, man. You know, well, I got that already. But you know, a handgun's good for getting to your long gun. Your long gun's good for getting to your everything else. So this is a Benelli Nova Tactical. It's a pump, but it'll work. I have other stuff, but this is the one it never ever lets me down, and it's comfortable as can be. But I'm mostly just having fun right now. But I hope you guys have your toilet paper sorted out. As you can see, I should probably start selling it. This is just, you know, the tip of the proverbial iceberg, and of course, I have my magical traps laid out everywhere for anybody. Okay, fuck all y'all. Y'all know I'm kidding around, right? Kidding and serious at the same exact time. I guess it's possible to be both, but I honestly do believe that we should have a good sense of humor about everything that's going on. This is not a drill. This is for real. This is a life-altering period of time for everybody. And the worst thing we can do is what most people are doing, which is panic, and the other end of the spectrum, of course, is to deny and deny and deny. The one thing I wanted to talk about, at least a little bit on this stream, you know, I wanted to have some fun, but one of the things I want to talk about is, of course, how society is governed, ruled, controlled. Everybody knows this, and everyone's got different extremes on what they believe, and I'm not trying to be some kind of a totally lunatic conspiracy theorist, but to say that I don't have some, of course, knowledge about these things as an occultist, as someone who practices dark arts with spirits that will, of course, clue me into things. A lot of us know things are coming in advance, or we get forewarning, or we see things as potential, and we know it's happened before, and we are absolutely educated, you know, about what could happen. And we're not just, you know, sheep running around scared. So I assume most of you, if you're a fan of my work, if you've been following me for any length of time, you've seen my work with Marbas on this issue. You know that right when it was beginning, I had an impulse to understand that this was potentially going to be a serious issue in the world. And I immediately started taking common sense precautions. I'm not the kind of prepper that goes out and buys thousands and thousands of rounds of ammo and 10 years worth of food and, you know, digs a trench to go piss in for the rest of my life. But I'm also rather, you know, I'm rational. I look at the world, and I've seen in other cultures and other countries that were rather, we'll say, intelligent and well put together. They've had societal collapses before, and I've watched that happen. I'm old enough to have seen it happen a couple of times, and I'm aware that that can happen again and again and again, and it can happen here. And it doesn't have to be permanent, and it doesn't have to be FEMA camps rounding everybody up and putting everybody in detention centers. It could just be people being people, let's be honest. You know, it could be a hurricane. It could be an earthquake. It could be a tornado. It could be anything that could disrupt your ability to live. Now, I coughed. Oh, shit. All right. Yeah, but anyway, these kinds of things happen, and they're normal. They're par for the course. And we are very complacent here in the first world. We're not used to having things like this happen. So even a little disruption feels like the end of the fucking world. And that's part of the Pied Piper routine, the Hegelian dialectic that I talked about in a video not too long ago, where you actually had to worry about, you do have to worry about this idea where those who are in power will create problems so that they can solve them with new draconian laws or with some kind of bullshit. And I don't expect everybody to agree with everything I'm going to say on the stream. It's perfectly fine if you don't. Just be polite about it. I'm here to be your friend tonight. I'm bored. I've been cooped up in my house basically because I work at home now, and my wife's gone all day, and I just, by the time I get up, I'm like, I'll take a walk around the school field, but that's about all the socializing I get. So I'm here to talk to you guys for fun, not just to be a guru or a preacher tonight. I'm trying to have a little bit of fun. So let's see who's here before I get deep into anything. Let's see. I can see where everybody started joining us. So we got Sarah. Sarah Petroselli, Black Tree Blue Raven, how you doing? Nita the Mystic, thank you for coming and doing your usual great job of moderating, keeping the riffraff at bay. Tara Cole has been watching my videos. You're kind of making a lot of comments lately. It's good to see you. Creature of Legend, I recognize that name. How you doing? Alpha Draconian, of course, I recognize you. How you doing? Melissa Gura, Donald James, let's see. Let's keep going here. Any good comments yet? Got that toilet paper and got that gun. Perfect. You got that right. Just because I do magic doesn't mean I don't... let's put it this way. If somebody's breaking into my house, I'm not going to cast a spell. I'm going to cast a bullet. You know what I'm saying? Trump would like that. Magical Mermaid, what's up? Ordo Sonitus Looks, what's up, my friend? You can hear me good. That's awesome. Thank you. Ubiquitous Mind. Thank the Dark Lord, I live in the far reaches of the Canadian North. You will probably never see it. Maybe like a moose will come and like bang on your door looking for toilet paper. That's about all you got to worry about. Patchwork, my brother, what's going on, my friend? And Seeking Serpent 6, I always love seeing you here. So, all right. So from this point forward, if you got something you want me to respond to specifically, try to put it in all caps because it's kind of hard. As you can see, I got a new pair of specs. These are not the ones I've been wearing. And you know what sucks about new glasses? Anybody here who actually wears new glasses from time to time, if you do wear glasses, you know that sometimes, especially if you've got a strong prescription like I do, when you get new glasses, it's like... I'm lucky I don't have a splitting headache right now. Usually I do get at least a little bit of a headache. Patchwork, I'm sorry, brother, but if you didn't have one already, with this going on right now, you're not going to get them that easily. I promise you. It's going to be harder. I'm sure there'll be some stuff still on the shelves right now, but you're not going to have the pick of the litter you would have had like when I go. Thank you for sanity, says Magical Mermaid. You got it. I'm really, I'm here, like I make jokes, about these things because it's not that I don't take them seriously. That's something I want you guys to know. I take these things really, really seriously, but I don't panic about them. I don't think panicking helps, Maybe 10 years ago, when I was a little younger and I was, completely skeptical about spirituality and I didn't have my spiritual house in order, and that's a big thing I want to talk about tonight maybe. When I didn't have my spiritual house in order and I wasn't with it and I wasn't, really prepared for life, if anything ever actually... cut loose, I would have panicked because I was paranoid about things. I was one of those people who was into conspiracy theories. I still, to a much more rational degree, am. Not that I believe in them all, but that I'm aware of them and I do pay attention to them because there's always truth in fiction, so to speak. And as a public figure now, as someone who has a little bit of a tiny following, I have to be responsible in what I talk about because I don't want to lead you guys into something that I can't validate or prove or that I don't have full faith in myself. So try to understand that when I'm talking about things that sound a little conspiracy theory-ish, it's coming from a spiritual place. It's coming from a place where I've seen things, I believe things wholeheartedly, but I'm not trying to convince you of anything. You've got to do your own research and you've got to have your own discernment. But the only thing I will say that is a blanket rule that I think if you trust me at all, and you probably already believe this, but if you trust me at all, you know not to trust any form of authority, that, especially the ones that say that they want to be your authority. Don't trust the government in that. It's not that it's always going to do evil, okay? There's a lot of good people in government. There's a lot of good people in society. And by good, I mean they are well-intentioned, okay? They may be assholes, but they're well-intentioned assholes. But the government is this apparatus that is there that maybe has a good intention, but read Plato's Republic, okay? People who try to aspire to power, who try to gain power, people who run for office, even if they're a good guy or a good girl, they're not you can't trust them. You know, I'm a Gen X kid. We don't trust authority by default, most of us. We grew up seeing what authority did, and we didn't like it. You know, a lot of these people who are, you know, right now mad at the boomers. I'm like, motherfucker, the boomers were our little older, you know, brothers and sisters and our aunts and our uncles and stuff. They were the ones that raised us too, or they were next to us. We saw all of these things growing, and I don't have a problem with boomers, but I get the meme. There is some truth to the meme. Okay, so anyway. Don't trust shit coming out of anything except your own actions. Don't trust the government. Don't trust Facebook. Don't trust YouTube. Don't trust these people, because these systems are put in place, especially these big tech companies have been put in place to make sure that you follow a script in life. They really have. And they've kind of created, they kind of do a balancing act, okay? They allow just enough free speech so that people come and use the platform, but then when it really counts, they flip that switch and the free speech dies almost immediately. They start cracking down on things. They start deleting posts. They start deleting videos. They start reprimanding people, putting people on, you know, limited state, all that kind of bullshit. And if you don't know what's going on, it can seem like I'm a conspiracy theorist when I point that out. I was having a conversation on my Facebook page, like, what, it's an hour ago, with one of my good early friend fans. I call him a friend fan because he's somebody who befriended me, and he is a fan as well. Lawrence Espinoza. He's a really smart guy, and I really respect him a lot. Even on the occasions that we disagree, I really respect his perspective. And he commented on a post that I made about my stuff being deleted on Facebook, that it was an algorithm issue. A bot did it. And we both came to the conclusion that it's still highly suspicious that the bots were so targeted against all things coronavirus oriented. It's kind of like they had a plan, they had an algorithm in place, and they shifted the decimal point a few spaces a little bit too far, and it was a little too sensitive, and everything got marked as spam. So that was a little out of control. And I'm going to remind everybody in the comments, if you want me to respond to something priority, please put it as a boldface, you know, use all caps. It's very small on my screen. Even with new glasses, I don't see very well. I have a high res monitor, guys. So when I play games, I'm usually sitting closer, and it's like I have like a real, you know, a real view into the real world. But so I don't see fine print from 5 feet away. So okay, so let's talk a little bit about two things. I want to talk about. This is an occult topic, okay? So it's a little political, but it's not. I'm not going to get partisan on my politics. I refuse to do that as a public figure, unless shit hits the fan, so to speak. Then I might start speaking out in one direction specifically. But if you know that I'm a Luciferian, you probably know where I stand, and I don't mind telling you that I'm a minarchist libertarian in principle, okay? Not in party. I don't give a fuck about parties. I think parties are ridiculously stupid. Every time I get involved in a party, I get pissed at them. They're all ridiculous power grubbing maniacs. But as a philosophy, I believe in total freedom as best as can be done in our society and in our culture. So, you know, I want to make sure that people have every possible opportunity to, and my thing just dinged, that's probably why I see I'm suddenly distracted. I want people to have every possible opportunity to be free. That means even if you are, for example, someone who believes in something even remotely that I might not agree with, like hardcore communism or socialism or something, so long as it's voluntary, I don't care what you do. If you want to get together and live your life the way you want to live it, so long as you're not forcing anybody to live that way within your community or whatever, I don't care. You know, be as, you know, I'm functionally liberal in my views on humanity. I don't believe in oppressing anybody. I believe in treating everybody with as much respect as I would want to be treated, the golden rule, basically. And that means I make mistakes, and that means I should be forgiven for those mistakes and not treated like some kind of a problem because I might make a mistake now and then on how people, you know what I'm saying? There's a certain give and take with that stuff. And some people won't like that. Some people won't like hearing that. They're kind of indoctrinated into a very specific way of looking at, you know, good and bad. I mean, they're neo-puritanical, if you will, in their desire and need to judge people based on things that are not really fair. Now, that is not just human nature. That is something that has been done propagandistically. That is something that has been fed into the mentality of human beings in the last 100 years. It's been allowed to germinate because it's an incredibly divisive mentality to have, to judge people based on not just their color of their skin, which is bad enough, which is ridiculous, but to then judge people also on whether they use the right term to talk about one another or political correctness and crap. This is a divisive action. This is designed to divide your culture so that you don't have any kind of community. And when they're talking about everybody should be socially isolating themselves right now, that's a meme. That's a metaphor for the last 10, 15, 20 years. Everybody has been trained more and more to isolate themselves. Go watch the movie Network, if you don't know what I'm talking about. Go watch the movie Network from the 70s. Watch how the mad prophet of the airwaves was, venting on television about this. How, please just leave me alone. Everybody's lives are getting smaller. Your little world is getting tinier, and all you're doing is staring into this tiny little ridiculous screen all day. That's not the real fucking world. That is. And most of you who are my followers, I'm sure, and when I say followers, I don't mean you follow me, but you follow my work. I'm sure you get that. And I'm sure if you have a spiritual perspective in life, you're already, even if you look at that screen, you can put it down and you can function in the real world, the real world. So the powers that be, this is an occult idea. You have to understand. We can go back really far. We can go back really far in antiquity, and we will see a power struggle between the elites. It's the same families. And full disclosure, though I'll never prove it to you because I'm never going to tell you who I am if I can help it, my family has some connection to royal families and things like that. That it's kind of like I do have blood relation to royalty, but I'm also the grandson of a stepchild of someone who was like Rockefeller, Rothschild level powerful in this country once upon a time. But I'm as poor as fuck because I was like the stepchild version. But my grandmother was incredibly wealthy, incredibly connected when she was younger, and her uncle, who was essentially, not her uncle, her father, her stepfather, was her. It's hard to explain. Her mother died, and her sister adopted her. Her mother's sister adopted her, and she was married to this man, and they raised her as their daughter. And she was, pretty well connected with things. And when I was a kid, we'd watch the news, and she would tell me the same kind of weird conspiracy stories that you hear, although a little bit more rational, but similar to the things you might hear on like the most weird conspiracy theory stuff. And she would talk about it like, they've been talking about this for years, that they're going to do this, and you watch out. By the time you're a grown man, they're going to have this and that. And I'm like, all right, well, whatever. So when I tell you that I have that, don't think I'm just saying that for like, ooh, look at me, I'm amazing. It's just I have an interesting perspective on it. And even I was taken aback by things when I started to see my grandmother wasn't just nutty, because we all thought she was crazy a little bit because of the life she led. She was a debutante. She was the type who was always drunk. She'd hang out with the literal, mobsters and things. I mean, she was like Paris Hilton. She was like Ivanka Trump or something. I mean, she was in that class of people. And when her stepfather died, because she didn't have blood relation, a lot of people came in and claimed that she had no right to inherit anything, so they gave her what would be in the millions today. I have no idea what the number is, but I know my uncle, when he reached a certain age, he was given the equivalent of millions. He made his fortune in Hawaii as an import-export guy. But my grandmother was given the equivalent of millions. She got married about 7 times, squandered it all between her marriages and investments and just being a playgirl, basically. And then here I am, a poverty-stricken young man who's very eloquent and can talk as if he's, from across the pond if he has to. But this is how I have certain, I don't want to say information, because I don't think that's where my information comes from, but that's where my willingness to believe comes from, because I heard things and things were said. So Tara Cole, I'm reading everybody's comments. I'm reading the bolds. I'm going to respond to those in a minute. But Tara made a very, somehow it always falls in our bloodlines. Now, obviously, if you go back far enough, we're all royalty. Okay, think about that. If you go back far enough in history, everybody's connected to a king somewhere because those guys got around, right? But as far as the elite are concerned, they do care about your breeding a whole lot. And there's reasons for that I do believe are spiritual. And this is where it gets really woo and out there, but I've had things I can't really talk about a lot. However, some people who follow my work, some people talk to me privately, know what I think about it. But there are, the Nephilim were not fully destroyed. They were not fully gone. There's still some of that bloodline floating through the world. And it's very, very diluted. And the true nature of the Nephilim, if you will, is not that they're just giants and big, strong, and what Nephilim are. They are the perfect spiritual conduit for higher level spiritual entities. What that basically means is, think of them as the perfect avatar for god men or god women. They were definitely both, and they ruled, in ancient times. Okay. And some of this is going to be woo. It's going to go over your head. You're going to be like, wow, you're completely crazy, Thorne. That's great. No, these are things I've seen in vision, believe it or not. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to accept it. But these are things that I've seen, and that they ruled ancient cities. They ruled the ancient world before Egypt, before Samaria, the time before the flood. Because the flood did happen, but it wasn't a global flood like the Bible describes. It was the equivalent, however, for their civilization. It might as well have been. It wiped out all of the city-states that were in existence at the time. And I'll give you a hint on where I've been looking. It's off the west coast of Africa, around the Eye of Africa, if you want to look for that. Look up Bright Insight, and you'll find information there. Now, there's a lot of people in this world who have very dilute amounts of the Nephilim legacy. Some have more, some have less. You can't tell by how you look. You can't tell by skin color, height, or anything else like that. But some people have the ability to be superior mediums with the spirit world because our biology, we are basically a radio. Okay, that is how you have to look at yourself. You're a radio for spiritual energy, for spiritual entities. And when your body dies, okay, the radio signal doesn't stop. Okay, that's why the whole thing about life and death is illusory at best. You do go on. Something will continue. It will be your consciousness that continues. And I'm actually writing a book about that right now. So hopefully I get that done in time for the coronavirus to kill enough people so that it'll be exciting. But that's it's pretty crazy how this stuff works, isn't it? But where I was going with this was that biologically speaking, anything has a consciousness. Even a rock, in my opinion, has consciousness. I don't think it's devoid of consciousness. I think it's just very low vibrational consciousness. Animals, the root word for animals is anima, animus, which is life, which is spirit. It is spirit. And animals are spiritual entities. They have just a little bit more of that ability to interface with the spiritual vibration of the universe. Now, as a non-dualist, there's a little bit more going on there, which I'm not going to talk about right now. But these entities, these beings, these people, these animals, they have varying degrees of ability to resonate with the spirit world. And as that is elevated through breeding, perhaps, if you will, because that's really what the original Abkalu did, the original Abgal, the original, what the Sumerians were talking about when they were talking about the Watchers, the original 7 that came down, the Azazels and the Samaels or whatever, all these, the Shemyazas and all these other, when they came down, their job as ambassadors, as watchers, as mitigators, as speakers for the Most High entities, and there's a quorum of them. There's not just one. There's not a Yahweh. There's a many. As they interacted with humanity, they encouraged through impulse, through inspiration, breeding urges that allowed humanity to become Homo sapiens sapiens, but also in addition to that, certain humans were given, just by the way these things work, they became more well-bred to have higher conscious entities invoke into them. And you will notice that people who are excellent sorcerers, people who are really good at mediumship, it is not something they have to practice. It is an innate talent. And that doesn't mean that they're the only ones can do this. It just means that their biology has like 0.0001% more of that, whatever gene it is that allows for that better communication to work. That's where it comes from. Now, what does this have to do with coronavirus and all this other bullshit? Well, of course, there is, of course, an element of truth to the fact that viruses do change our DNA over time, but I don't really think that's what this is about. But I do believe that the powers that be go back to these original cities. Of course, the families have changed over time. They're probably not the same families at all. They've been lost, recovered, and so on, married and mingled and interbred so much that the blood is diluted. And I know some people are going to start talking about reptiles and all this other stuff. And I mean, that's cool if that's what you believe. If I see one, I will be a believer right away. And I'm not a denier. I've never seen one, so I have no opinion. But that has been going on since, 12,000 BC. When the asteroid hit in the Pacific and caused the Elder Dryas period, where there was a flood that swept across Africa. Well, they were at the height of their early civilization, probably somewhere in the Bronze Age for them, maybe higher. I'm not a Stargate guy, but I do believe in a precursor civilization that was wiped out and led to the legends, the cultural memory that spread throughout the globe. I mean, pretty much every corner of the world has some flood legend somewhere in there. Some legend of either a flood or a great exodus from some kind of cataclysm in which deposited humanity where they were. Something like that was almost always in the culture somewhere. So this eventually led to bigger cities, and some people still had enough of this genetic code that they were able to invoke spiritual entities strongly, and they were able to become pharaohs and kings and great Gilgameshes and all of these. Now, of course, some of these things are, they're allegorical, they're metaphorical. You shouldn't take them at literal value. I don't believe, for example, in the literal translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh, but I think it's symbolic of things that were true in a manner of speaking, as most myth is. So these beings, these people were still pretty connected, and they still are, because the elites that function today, the ones who run the world, if you look at Epstein's Island, for example, you look at Bohemian Grove, where people think they worship Moloch, although I have some problems with that. I don't really think that's what they're worshiping at all. But when you watch this, what the elites do for fun spiritually, you see that they're very much into the same things we are. And some of us who get to a certain point, we speak to these beings that they work with, and we get warnings. I'm going to tell you flat out, we get warnings about what not to look at, and we get warnings about what we can talk about when we see things. And some of those warnings are because it's just too crazy to believe and I can't prove it. It's just my own personal gnosis, and I wouldn't subject you to it because it's just too out there. But the things that I've seen that I can speak about is you have to understand that there are different factions that are currently competing, and they're always competing, okay? They're competing for ultimate authority over the world, and every generation or so they get to a big argument about which form of human farming that they want to use to keep humanity in line, okay? And in the 1700s, there was the Enlightenment and a group of people who wanted to use a more free-range version of human farming. They wanted to allow humanity a little bit of a longer rope so that we could build a better society for everybody, including them. We were allowed off the chain long enough to do that. But then the same group, I mean, they're not enemies, okay? You have to get that through your head. The people you see in government right now, whether it be Trump or anybody else, they're not enemies with these people. They are all in the same families. If you knew the things about Trump, about his, I guess it was his grandfather, his uncle or whatever, he was the one who stole all of Tesla's stuff. I mean, look it up. These people go back, they're connected, they've been doing this stuff forever. My grandmother loved Trump, by the way, I'm not going to lie. You go back to antiquity, you'll see that these same families have, of course, been running things. This is not new to most of you people. You know this. But they are friends. They're all friends in their own way. They are rivals, but they have pacts with each other. They don't kill each other. There's a reason why Trump is not going to be assassinated. For those of you who like or don't like him, you will know he will never be assassinated as long as he plays by certain rules, okay? Now, whether you like Trump or not, you have to understand, just as an example, even if you agree with some of his policies, I believe he is of that, closer to that Enlightenment period faction. I don't think he is of that faction. I think he likes the rule of kings thing a little bit, but he's of that faction where he wants to have a nationalistic perspective of the world. And then there's a globalist perspective of the world. And they're competing right now for which one is going to be in control. And for the last 4 years, well, we all see what's been happening between Brexit, between Trump, and I know that pisses some people off because they think everything's about race. It's not. It has nothing to do with race, but it does have everything to do with inheritance and heritage and bloodlines and all that. Yes, absolutely. So when you fucking know what's going on between these different competing factions, it's obvious that right about now, when we're looking at another election, when we're looking at all of this stuff, Brexit has officially happened, UK is about to be on its own, well, it's about time for them to drop something like this into the world and let it happen. And if you think that Trump didn't know, by the way, you'll find out. Just give it time, just like 9/11. It's not any different, okay? He whether you like him or not, okay, you have to see that no one's a hero in this, okay? There is no such thing. Anybody who seeks power, ask yourself why. So very rarely, I guess the last time that happened that I'm aware of that someone sought power for the right reasons was they made a movie about him. I think it was Gladiator, Marcus Aurelius, and he took power and he gave it back to the people supposedly. But that's a faction, okay? They are part of a faction of rulers. They will not be assassinated. They're not like the Kennedys. You have to understand there's a puppet layer. There's a layer of public-facing elites, and then there's the elite elites. And Trump would be like at the lowest level of the true elites. He really is. But, you know, most of these others, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, they're all puppets. They're just faces that the elites work through, and they can be assassinated if they step up, if they don't play the game. Reagan was, you know, if you look at Reagan, he was in Bohemian Grove. He's there with Nixon, and he's playing ball with them. He gets elected, and he starts doing things that undermine everything. He starts doing nationalistic things more than they wanted, and he, you know. And they shot him in the stomach with a .22, which is a warning. That's not a real assassination attempt. So they fucked him up. They put him into MK Ultra probably. His brain got scrambled, and for this last 4 years, we're him going, we're you know, just watch Reagan from his second term. You'll know what I'm talking about. So when you see these things happening in the world right now, you have to recognize that panic is not warranted, because this is what it's always like. Okay, that's the thing you have to remember. If you're sitting here going, oh my God, they got us, we're about to go into FEMA camps, we're about to go extinct, they're going to clamp down on us, Trump bad, you know, Orange Man bad, Hillary bad, blah, 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 blah. You are being divided right now along the most ridiculous lines that I've ever seen in my life. And I'm a Gen X kid, and I saw everything. You know what I mean? You're being divided in the most ridiculous ways. And even I feel bad because I didn't wake up to that fully until more recently. And some of my former friends, I despise them now because they're so divisive in their mentality. You know, the fact that I have a gun, they wouldn't let their kids come to my house. They believed all these things. They were just so bigoted in their own way, even though they thought they were tolerant. And the other side is no better. The other side really isn't that much better in some respects. It's obviously different for every side. I'm not trying to judge anybody here, because I think if you're watching my content, you are a truth seeker. You are interested in enlightenment. You're interested in things that, you know, you're willing to see when I'm right and you're willing to see when I'm wrong, and you're not going to be mad either way. You're going to be interested, even in my wrong information is useful to you. So let me just end up with this thing, and then I'm going to go to the comments. What's going on right now is, even if it was an accidental thing, even if it was just bat soup, okay? Let's just say that my visions, the things I've seen, are wrong, and it's not just bat soup, or it is just bat soup, and it wasn't out of a containment center that got loose, or America didn't drop it over there, or whatever the conspiracy theory turns out to be. The fact that it's happening, they're going to capitalize on it, and the next step, in the next year, maybe two, I am banking on the fact that, at least in the controlled countries, the really heavily controlled countries, the EU, China, countries like that, you're going to see incredible martial law for medical reasons. You're going to see forced vaccinations. You're going to see forced testing. You're going to see new bills, be presented in America that are going to diffuse any chance you have of having freedom over your body in the coming 10 years or so. Look at what happened after 9/11, okay? And I'm not trying to make light of this, and I'm not trying to diminish the tragedy that happened, but 5,000 people died as a result of 12 people with box cutters, and all of a sudden, everybody's got to get strip search at the airports. We have to have special IDs. The internet has to be monitored for every other word in the book, and Facebook and Google and all these companies, which are basically countries, if you want to ask my opinion, these companies are given a mandate that they're allowed to not just spy on you, but to censor you. And the government gives them that power because the government wants to be able to tell Facebook, don't let them say this right now. We need to control things a little bit. Just don't break the law, you know? And that's why Zuckerberg gets hauled up in front of Congress, and he looks like he's wetting his pants, but in reality, he's not really in any trouble. He's fine. You know, he's just being reminded, you've been playing ball with China a little too well. You've made a lot of money. You've been giving China all this info, and you're not playing ball with us the way you're supposed to. And so they get whatever. So yeah, this is all occult, by the way. This is all spiritual. This is not just because I watch the news. I don't really watch the news. I hate the news. But I do reach things. I do like alternative media, and I do analyze things from a spiritual perspective. I do ask my spirits which things to study, and I trust them enough to know that even if I'm wrong about what I'm saying, I'm right enough in the right direction where my wrongness is still right, if that makes sense. So if they warn me, you know, if they give me visions of an apocalypse, I'm not going to expect a literal apocalypse, but I am going to have a mentality of hard times are coming. You know, things are coming down the pipe, and it's going to be dangerous, and I better get ready for things. And that's kind of what's been happening. It's not super bad. I don't think this is a world-ending situation. I think the people who are panicking are stupid. I think, you know, when they're telling you on the news that you need to flatten this curve, they're 100% right. That's scientifically 100% valid. It's just a question of, how much are you willing to let them take from you to protect you? And people who live in these gilded cages of protection, I have no respect for. The people who would rather be safe than free I don't have a lot of respect for. I mean, obviously we need help from time to time. Obviously, we have to make concessions in our lives on a daily basis about one choice from another. And I'm not judging you if sometimes you choose safety over freedom on a personal level. But when you start voting for safety versus freedom and you're taking my freedom so you get to feel a little safer, I just got this for you. I don't agree with you. I think you're wrong. But that's exactly how we got the witch trials. For those of you who are practicing magic, for those of you who believe in the spirit world, who believe in magic and are pissed off at Christians for limiting people's spiritual beliefs, that is exactly the mentality that allowed for that. Those of you who are willing to give up your freedom for whatever, so that you can feel a little safer, are no better than the petrified little pilgrims willing to burn somebody at the stake because they happen to talk to their cat in the middle of the night. You're fucking stupid. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. You're my friends and fans, but you're stupid if you think that. I say that with love, all right? Well, self-love. Fuck you. If you believe that, you're stupid. You'd be the first person to put me on a pole and have me burn because you were petrified, because you were ignorant and didn't understand. So I don't want to get into all of those little, all those different things, but I am ranting a little bit tonight. I'm definitely, I guess, I haven't watched Alex Jones in about 6 years, but I probably should just to see how crazy he's gotten. But I definitely invoke whatever spirit that he's got going on. So going forward, I want you guys to be aware that everything that we talk about, especially with relation to the coronavirus, and in relation, I'm sure just by saying that, my video is going to be flagged now. Just by paying attention to these things, you're doing a spiritual thing right now. Because what is going on right now is, according to the spirit world that I work with, this is an unavoidable nexus of an event that they are aware of and causing as much as they are shaking their heads at, if that makes sense, because the different factions of humanity are battling over what to do in a very Cold War fashion. And however this ends up in the next 4 to 10 years, we'll say, is going to define the next 3 or 4 generations of how the world works. And it may even be for the rest of whatever's left of humanity's future. We may wipe ourselves out over it, who the hell knows. But the spirit world is always looking to evolve us, especially certain parts of the spirit world. Certain parts of the spirit world would love for us to recover that ability to be perfect mediums for them. They would love to have humanity become a perfect avatar again, because either they would like to inhabit our bodies, or because if you don't know what you are by now watching my channel, if you don't know that you are divinity, they're building better avatars for that divinity all the time. And to do that, unfortunately, you need winners and losers. You need evolution. You need some people to be Nephilim and some people not. And that's what they're doing. And that's what they've always been doing, okay? So be aware of that. They're just doing it a little differently now. Now they've learned science. They've got science to such a level now where they can do things with genetic engineering. For all we know, they've already done it. I mean, I don't even know. There's certain things I can't see, and if I did, I wouldn't tell you. But I have no idea about them. All right, so I am going to go back. It looks like a lot of people have been making comments. And if you guys have trash talk or something like that, I hope Nina's kicking you out, whether she agrees with what I have to say or not. I noticed that the likes were 6 and now they're 3, so I think some people undid their likes of this video. Let's see. Let me scroll down a little bit. Okay. All right. Hopefully you guys are still here who asked the first questions. I'm going back up. I see the first one that I can see that is obvious is Akabli Tariq. He asked, how long do you think this will last? I say about 3 weeks. Nope. This is going to absolutely be pretty much permanent, but you're going to see it come and go. You're going to see basically a seasonal thing with this until they make a vaccine for it. I do think that they'll have a vaccine that will make it more trivial. I don't think they'll ever wipe it out. I think it's going to be a seasonal thing for the foreseeable future. And I don't think it's just going to go away. I really don't. 3 weeks is when it's going to probably spike. You know, I think 3 weeks you're looking at a situation where in the next 3 weeks, the places that don't have it will have it bad. The places that have it bad now will have it worse. And just like I know people don't trust the government, nor should you, and I'm not saying you should, but some of the information you're getting is going to be correct because it's part of how they trick you. The part that's correct is that flatten the curve thing. Staying home, or at least isolating yourself from other people. And I'm not giving you medical advice. Quote, you know, make sure YouTube censors who are watching this, I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just quoting what they're telling me. This curve thing that they're talking about is very valid. And I don't know if she's still watching. She was watching originally, but she might have had to go to bed. I do know someone who's in we'll say the nursing industry. She knows a lot about this stuff. She gets a lot of reports on this, and they're petrified because they know very well that if this hits hard and fast, their hospital beds are going to be full, their respirators aren't going to cover the problem, and you're going to have more people dying than the virus would ever kill. This is what people don't understand. If the virus, 1 to 2% isn't little, guys. That is a lot. If everybody in the world gets it, that's hundreds of millions of people dying. But let's pretend, for example, that it's just 1 or 2%, and it's only going to be a small percent that get it. Okay, let's pretend, which is probably a rational thing to say. If you have more than, say, 400 or 500 people in a regular city of about 1 million people, if you get about 400 or 500 people that need a respirator, that's pretty much filled up all the respirators that they have in the city. You're probably going to be talking about, at the way this thing spreads, double, triple, quadruple that number who need a respirator at the same time. So they're going to have to start doing death panels and triage, and people are going to die that would have lived otherwise. So if you're out there with, swinging your big dick around saying that you're not scared of this and you think it's all a hoax, well, just understand the role you're playing. I'm not judging you because I am a Luciferian. I think you have a right to be a dick if you want. But just understand what you're doing. So we're looking at, honestly, I think that we're going to see a bulge in this probably closer to May. That's just a subtle prediction. Don't hold me to it. But it's just my gut telling me figure May is when it's going to crescendo, and then it's going to just level off. And it'll stay that way until their prediction about the warm weather works. Because we do see it in the southern countries where there's summer right now, but it's not to the level we have it up here. Maybe that's just because they're not testing for it. I don't know. Oh, no, I have it. So you're going to see it peter off in the summer. It's going to decline. You're probably going to have one hell of a whiz-bang summer going out and trying to get over this isolation you've been through. But a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. The economy is going to be a trash heap a little bit. I don't agree that it's going to bounce back that easily. I know for myself, becoming self-employed right now was... I wish they had, hopefully I did the right thing. I think I did because it's limiting my exposure to the world, but I'm not really scared of getting it. I think that I saved up enough money because of this, because I was basically working 2 jobs for a whole year and a half because you guys were so awesome and supported me that I was able to save up enough that I could make a plunge into being self-employed. You should have about 6 months of savings so that you can live without a paycheck before you do anything self-employment-wise, and I managed to accrue that. It took a lot of work. Anybody who thinks that I'm, money grubbing is a jackass, look at my life. You'll know I'm not. I'm a very humble person in terms of finance. I just know how to spend my money. So I'm careful enough that I have a savings so that I can live. But, it could turn out we get bank runs. It could turn out that the economy dips enough that you guys won't buy my books, you won't buy my services, you won't buy my things, and I don't blame you. I don't expect you to. If you're sitting there and you have no job, what are you going to do? So I fully understand. I'm not gonna be wringing my hands and trying to get your money from you right now, guys. Trust me. Let's see. Terracole says, still am aware as well. Let's see. Hence the do not watch this video. Yeah. Some people, when you see that, you just go right for it, don't you? It's like a cat. All right. Gabriel Aquino, what's going on? I think I recognize that name. I think I've seen you before. Any tips on opening spirit sigils to meditate on? That's a general magic question. Yes, there's quite a few things you can do. You really need to be able to reach different transcendental states. You need to be able to, in my opinion, reach an open state, which is basically daydreaming but with a purpose. You need to be able to focus, which means you have only one intent and thought in your mind at that time. It's completely focused, and you need to be able to hold it for an extended period of time, not just a split second, but like a minute or more. And then you have to be able to empty your mind completely of all thoughts, which is the inverse of focus, I guess you would say. But instead of focusing on a thought, you're focusing on being conscious and you are aware that you are not your thoughts, you're the spaces between your thoughts. And this is actually the true meaning of meditation. Real meditation is not visualizing, although people will say it is. Real meditation is the dissolution and the dissolvement of the objective world. That is what real meditation is. It is becoming fully aware of the subjective world as the real world and the objective world as illusory. That doesn't mean it's not valid. It just means it's illusory in nature, and that the things you see are not what you think they are, but they are something. They do exist, but it's still a subjective thing. They are part of you. But that's another video for another time. But when you're working on opening spirit sigils, obviously you don't have to use a sigil. I don't work with sigils every time I work with a spirit. Sometimes, when I was younger, I practiced hypnosis a lot, and so for me, entering a different altered state of mentality is second nature, even just because of that, even if I didn't have any other advantages. And so I enter the right state of mind. And there's a give and take there. You can't just open a sigil and expect a spirit to come. The spirit has to be interested in communicating with you. That doesn't mean that it's going to be, that hard. I think really what happens is most people, if they're even a little bit open to the spirit world, you're being called by something. There's look up the word theurgy. What I do is basically a version of infernal theurgy. I work with infernal divinities as a form of theurgy, of trying to elevate myself. What you're trying to do is you're trying to become aware of the spiritual entities that want to work with you, and you're trying to create kind of a bridge between your consciousness and theirs, because although you are all part of the same source, you are individuated in your identity. You're basically a multiple personality disorder universe. You're a shattered singularity, okay? And each little shard, each little facet of that singularity is not separate from the whole, but you have a separate subjective experience, if you will. And it's only separate by illusion, but it is separate. And as you work with these other spiritual entities, they will come right up to the edge of your subjective universe, and they'll influence you with inspiration, with events, with synchronicities, with all kinds of stuff. And that is how you have your communication happen. So when you're working with a sigil, you're essentially taking something that either a spirit or a person invented and created to be used with that spirit, and over time it becomes useful, even if it wasn't a gift by the spirit in the first place. It does create kind of like if you walk over the same place in the woods long enough, you get a trail that stays there. A sigil becomes this kind of thing. And if you focus on it, you clear your mind first. You want to enter an empty-minded state. And you want to have your ritualized setup, whatever works for you. You have to recognize the candle and the incense and all that stuff is really for you. It is for the spirit too, but it's the only way the spirit experiences it is through you, if you will. They do get energy from it, even if you don't participate in it. But to really, really, really benefit, and for you to really make a connection, you have to understand incense is about smells, and smells are about memory and mind. If you've ever noticed, if you smell a familiar smell, you're instantly transported to the place you smelled it, if you're even remotely sensitive. So incense will kind of get you in that mystical place, and it is an offering to the spirit. And if the offering, it's also a medium for the spirit to manifest in if you're using evocation. When you're using a sigil and you open that sigil, what you need to do is you need to clear your mind fully. For me, it's instantaneous, but some people have to do a whole meditative procedure to get there. You empty your mind, then you open your eyes, and you don't, you still keep your mind empty. You put the sigil in your face, basically, somehow. It enters your vision, and you focus on it with your attention first. So you don't necessarily have any thoughts in your head, but you're focusing on it with an empty mind first. And you watch it, you experience it until visual artifacts start to happen. The reason for that is because you're trancing out into it. Okay, that's really what you're doing. You're trancing into it. Your eyes are kind of getting the cells within your retina are getting because of the contrast, they're getting a little loopy, and you'll start to see like an after image. But this kind of causes hallucinatory effects in your subconscious, which when you start to open your mind, once you release yourself from that empty mind state, you go into an open mind state. You release your mind to daydreaming mode. Once you allow yourself to daydream with that sigil, then that thing will start taking off, and it's going to start opening for you. And all you really have to do at that point is alternate between high levels of focus and that open-minded meditative state where you're daydreaming and focusing at the same time. Intonation, anything that you feel works to get you into that place will work. And if the spirit is willing to respond to you, it will. That doesn't mean you'll notice it. That's the other problem, is people just don't know what to expect. And anyway, this whole stream wasn't meant to be just on that, but I hope that answered most of your question. That's the best advice I can give you. Okay, that's your philosophy tarot as well. I think at that point I was talking about all the Nephilim and all that stuff. Have you seen the huge trees in visions? I've been told in my blood being Nephilim, I choose my parents. Yeah, I mean, realistically speaking, Tarot Cole, when you're talking about I choose my parents, if you are non-dualistic in your mentality, you believe that essentially what you are is a dreamer in some capacity who's creating their reality one way or another. Either they're choosing a reality that they want to experience, or they're creating it, one or the other. And you would have certainly chosen your parents on some level. It doesn't mean that you chose wisely. Some people would argue. I don't mean you personally necessarily, but your choice is usually when we reincarnate, it's because we either really want to live again or we're terrified. When we pass on, there's a jolt because we're not aware of what we really are, and when we become aware of that, I can make a whole video series on just this alone, but it's going to be in my books. You're going to have to be patient because I want to make sure I say it right. But essentially, people, even spiritual people who don't have You may know intellectually that you are the source, but you may not know in a gnosis way. Gnosis doesn't mean knowledge. Gnosis means experiential. Gnosis is to be the knowledge. It is to experience the knowledge. It is to have it. You understand it, not overstand it. You are an experiencer of the truth, not just a recording of the truth. So if I tell you you're the source, but you don't have the experience of sourceness, you're not ready. Okay. And when you have that moment when your heart stops and the dream shifts to the next, it's gonna maybe even feel like a nightmare. Okay. You're gonna shift into that next phase. Your ego is gonna drift. You're gonna say, well, I'm not my ego. I'm not this person I thought I was. I'm not Tara. Who the hell am I? And that shock is enough to send most people right back into the mortal world right away. They're petrified. They can't handle it. The revelation of what they are, just like a lucid dream. Once you begin to dream lucidly, there's sort of this point where there's no return. You wake up. It's similar to that. When you start having this moment of lucidness about what you are, the dream starts to end, and your higher self, the higher levels of you, and I don't like to say it like that because that creates a false impression, but it's the only way to describe it. The higher part of you that wants to continue the dream forever is going to immediately snap down some kind of logical reason why you're not, even when you don't die. Like, let's say you perform magic and it works really well. The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have your success. You're going to go, holy shit, magic's real. And that means that all this other stuff is real. Maybe I am divinity. Well, then you're going to get slapped on the ass real quick by some kind of bad luck or something. Something that's going to make you feel like you're not special. Something that's going to make you feel like you're not a divinity. You're going to feel, you're going to make a mistake. And I see that happen to me once in a while, too. It definitely still happens. But because I'm more aware of that, I predict that when I do pass on, I'll still be shocked because I don't think, transitioning is easy for anybody unless they reach a certain point. I think if I died tomorrow, I'd be a little shocked. Maybe in 50 years I won't. But if I did die tomorrow, I think the transition would be smoother than for most people. And I would be able to maintain some composure and not jump into a new life immediately. And I'm actually working on something special that's going to be part of my next book, which I can't wait to talk about. So let's get into when you asked about Black Tree Blue Raven asked about the trees. Far and spaced apart, Eye of Africa. That's where my family. Now, I can't say I've seen trees or anything. I mean, I've seen, I've seen some really, in some of my visions, I have seen trees that were like world trees. They were gigantic. They were like the trees in California, the really big, whatchamacallit, those, you can drive a car through them. But I don't think that was anything significant about any place. So I might not have seen something you've seen, but you can always send me a message about that, and maybe I'll look into it. But I don't know if I've seen anything like that. Oh, that's a good question. Magical Mermaid asked, may I ask how many spiritual traditions have you studied? I generally don't study anything. Anybody who knows my work long enough know that I'm a shoot from the hip kind of guy. I don't like to bury my nose in a book. I will skim occasionally on books that I like from people that I'm interested in. I think I've read maybe 30 pages of E.A. Quetting, and I do actually endorse parts of the things that he says in Evoking Eternity. I think that was an excellent book on evocation. It's exactly the kinds of things. It's as good as any. I mean, it's a good book. There's definitely some other sources, but spiritual traditions that I've studied, not really any. I mean, I'm not really a studier. The closest I would get to studying would be in my book. I mentioned Alan Watts and Terence McKenna, but they weren't really study for me. What you have to understand is everything I'm telling you. And I know how this sounds to people who aren't aware of how this works. This is personal gnosis of mine. This isn't something that I opened a book and said, well, that makes sense. Let me talk about it. This is stuff that I have deduced, put together, figured out, and extrapolated from pop culture, from the world, from my experiences with spirits. And when I started listening to people like Alan Watts on YouTube a few years ago, I already had all of these ideas. But the way he spoke and the way he put them in perspective, I didn't know I was a non-dualist. I just felt like I had to be God because there couldn't be a God above me. I had to know. I knew these things. I knew things about myself, but I couldn't put them into words. I knew we were all one. I knew we were all this thing. I knew holistic reality was what I thought it was, but I couldn't put things into language, if that makes sense. So I had the gnosis, but I didn't have the conduit through which to express it. And by listening to Alan Watts, that validation, my ego was basically knocked around, and I realized that my ego was a mask. And I realized that this person saying these things, I know everything, is just a puppet of me. It's basically my version of an Obama or a Hillary or a Clinton or something, or a Bush. It's my version of a puppet that runs my life. And if I step back, that life will still go on. This puppet will still do what it does, but I will not be quite so concerned about it. When I say I mean the greater I. I don't mean the I in this body. And every now and then, I become aware of that fact briefly. I'll have in meditation, I'll have these moments of clarity. I'll have these moments where I sort of pull back a little bit and I become aware that I am not just me, and they're not long lasting, they're fleeting. So that's my level of attainment, if you will. I haven't reached that point where I am God all the time. I don't think people in life can really achieve that. I think even the bodhisattva, the people who are supposedly enlightened in this life, they're enlightened in still a kind of probationary sense, in that they've had their moment of truth, and when they pass on, they will continue. What really happens is when you become aware of this, when you do become aware of what you are, your life does change, because you no longer take certain things so seriously. You'll stub your toe and you'll get mad, you'll kick over something, but you're still going to laugh about it. You're going to say, whatever, and you're going to admit to your anger. Like on Facebook, I got angry today because I felt like my posts were being censored, and I was probably being a little irrational. And I said, I was heated. I was definitely heated. And thanks to Lawrence Espinoza pointing out that my stuff wasn't being singled out. It was just Facebook that's fucking around. And apparently that link still now works again. I can share it again. But that's what I'm talking about. And I have to be sincere. That's part of my pact with my spirits. That doesn't mean that I have no secrets. It just means that I have to be sincere. If I tell you something, I can't lie about it. You know what I mean? And if I make something up as entertainment, I have to be clear that it's entertainment. Or, sometimes I'll do a ritual where I'll ignite my cauldron and I'll use a match head on a piece of charcoal in there. That's how I burn my incense. And I'm always upfront about that's why the cauldron just bursts into flames like that. It wasn't because Marbus touched it and laid it on fire. So how many traditions have I studied? I just studied life, my friend. I have no idea. I wouldn't think of it that way. I've never been to, I was raised a Christian, and I guess that would be the only one I've studied, I guess you could say, but I'm not really, that's not me. Let's see. You knew that the government was going to close travel 3 days before they did last week. Has been a curse as a child and a gift now, yeah. Some of this stuff, this knowledge stuff is both, absolutely. And what's worse is when you have that and then it doesn't work sometimes. Like, that's the worst to me. I'm really empathic, and when I'm around people, I can almost read them like a book, but then when I can't, it sucks. Like when someone's really good at warding and shielding, even if they don't know magic, they just know they have a good poker face, and I can't read their body language right away, and it takes me a little bit longer to figure them out. I feel blind. Like, if you've never had empathy like I have and then suddenly not be able to use it for any reason, it makes you a doofus. You can actually see me around people. If I read you well, I'm suddenly calm, confident, and I have an authoritative mentality. But as soon as I don't read you as well, then I can actually get passive. And I get like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, whatever you say. Because I'm limited to just what I can say and what I can see, and it's not as good. All right, let's see. Let's get to some real questions here. Hopefully I'm not skipping anybody. They needed an event as a distraction. Yeah, that's true. But, that's always how it works. You wait long enough, you'll get one. Oop, I think we just instantly went down to the bottom there. Sorry, guys. There's a lot of questions this time, a lot of bold comments. So give me a minute to work my way through them. Divide and conquer. Yes, Tara Cole, you're absolutely right. Creature of legend. The reason I don't think this is not a government conspiracy is, oh my goodness, because government is owned by corporations, and you spread it out so it'd be a little bit sorry about that, man. Creature legend, I appreciate you, but I can't read that. Money like copyright, yeah, I had to split that message up because it really did it get censored, Creature legend? Oh man, holy cow. I kind of don't deny it. I believe you're probably right, it probably was. Let's see. Being free, there's that throat chakra. Yeah, my throat chakra is overactive. Anybody who knows me well enough knows my throat chakra is a little too much. I gotta tone it down a little bit. Let's see. They're singling out and trying to starve out Nephilim. Yes and no. They are, but they're not. They're actually. See, you have to understand how their mind works. At least some of them, not all of them. Some of them have the mentality of the strong will survive and they will become rulers in time if that is their role. But they better not take their throne, so they're always going to make sure you don't take their position. But they do look for people that are either going to be good slaves or people who have certain traits, and they either offer to bring them in or they shut them out. But they understand that because of the way this is working, you're going to have people who evolve into being superior in that sense. And what that means is not racist, it's nothing like that. It just means superior in their eyes, what they think of as superior. Superior capability, if you will, superior integration with spirit or whatever. But to do that, they need to squish humanity. They need to squeeze. You know what I mean? If you ever watched Dune, there's a scene where Baron Harkonnen is talking to his nephew. He's like, "Go and squeeze them." That's what they do. They squeeze, and they squeeze cultures and they squeeze societies so that the weak minds will be devoured by the culture. They'll be devoured by the distractions, the bread and circus, and the intelligent will rise a little bit, but they're not necessarily any better off. Anybody who knows anybody with a high IQ, like I have, in the 140s IQ to high 130s, tested. And someone with a high IQ doesn't necessarily mean that they're better. In fact, you can be pretty fucking stupid because you tend to have it so much easier with certain things that you are stupid about obvious things. You can be really like, I'm not very responsible because I always figure a way out of problems without ever actually to do the work, okay? So in that sense, I'm not that better, okay? I'm actually, in some ways, as much as it's an advantage, it can have handicaps to it. There's pros and cons. But just like that, being more spiritually aware can make you crazy. Someone like me who went through their childhood experiencing what I did, the spiritual world that I was experiencing, it drives you crazy, and you snap hard into either total insanity where you're completely superstitious and you think that everything is this superstitious stuff, or you go hardcore skeptic like I did, and that's usually the response, one of those two. Buy a respirator and goggles. Well, the respirators I'm talking about, I'll read that out loud. Magical Mermaid said, "I did happen to buy a respirator, goggles, and a box of latex gloves last month." When I said respirator before, I didn't mean the N95 mask. I'm talking about the lungs that basically breathe for you. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so a lot of guys made bold comments that weren't really questions. I was hoping those would be questions. Let's see. Evoking Eternity is an excellent book. Oop, it bumped. Let's see. I did happen to buy. Yeah, okay, I'm getting there. I'm getting there, guys. Hopefully I'm getting to your last comments soon. Meant to create my own sigil. The biggest problem with the world is lack of consciousness. There we go. All right, guys, I think I've gotten to the end of your comments there. So, yeah, I mean, if you guys have any other thoughts you want me to talk about, anything else you want me to bring up, I kind of got to the end of this. I'm not going to read the fine print stuff tonight because you guys are chatting away. I'll probably read it after the stream. So I really apologize if I'm not responding to someone who wants me to comment on something. But how long have I been going? Yeah, we'll go for a few more minutes. So, I kind of was... I was kind of like not sure whether I wanted to do a lot tonight or this week because, I do get occasional bouts of, when I say depression, I don't mean moodiness. I mean, I get like lethargic and I get like, I just don't fucking feel like it. Especially with this stuff going on, I'm watching the news and I don't really care, it's not getting me down or anything, but I'm realizing that if I don't talk about coronavirus, what am I going to talk about? And I'm sure I just got flagged again for something. If I don't talk about those things, what am I going to talk about? People are that's what they want to talk about right now. And I'm looking at all of YouTube, I'm looking at my favorite content creators, and everybody's cashing in the coronavirus topic. And, that's fine. I don't bemoan that. But I do feel like I don't want to just be a me too about the corona stuff. I want to be able to give you guys something else to think about. At least sporadically, occasionally. Most of my content on Facebook, if you're watching me on Facebook, you know that I'm not actually posting a lot of magical stuff. I'm posting funny memes because I'm kind of trying to work kind of magic through that. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. Memes are a kind of magic. If you don't know that, you need to learn it. But they're a way to change how the world responds to things. They're a way to change the moods of people around you. They're a way to work on a mundane level magic, if you will. And I feel like one of the ways that we could combat this is to create a kind of egregoric protector, if you will, in our own personal lives that is probably best based on humor. Humor is the best destroyer of anything dark in reality. If you can laugh at an enemy spirit, okay, even if it kills you, you're going to die in good company, because there's going to be other spirits around you going, that was fucking awesome, come here, you know. That was cool. So die laughing if you have a choice, always. No, I never studied tarot. No, I didn't. No, I've never studied tarot. I have no idea what the study of tarot means. I buy tarot cards, and I learn roughly what they mean by just snapshotting them a little bit with my mind. I have the books of them. I glance at them. I go, good enough. And I go by what the card looks like. I scry the cards, guys. And if you watch me do my readings, they're pretty good, actually. No, I don't study tarot. I don't study when you say study, okay, I don't put myself into a submissive position of knowledge. I don't look up at knowledge and go, please give me what I want. I don't study you. I'm a scanner. And as I said before, I have an IQ in the 140 range. I should take the Mensa test. I'd probably pass it. But the problem that I have is I get a little kind of, we'll say a little, what's the word? Stubborn. I get a little bored, because when I study something, I get to a certain point of mastery, and then I get bored and I leave it alone. I drop it right quick. So I tend to study best. I tend to learn best by, I just go with what I feel like I want to know that week, and I Google it and I'll study it that way. But I don't study. If you said, what books have you read? What traditions have you studied? None. I don't do it that way. I know that's hard to believe, because I do know enough from my research, if you will. But I call it more like research. And I know that sounds like semantics, but it's not. If you looked at the books I have, they're brand new. You know what I'm saying? They've never been read. I have books that are piled up that I'm just going to kind of skim through this, and I'm kind of going to just, I can't explain it. That's why, if you've been watching my work long enough, you'll see that I went from kind of just talking about what I believe to saying, oh, what I believe is basically a form of Neoplatonism and Vedanta kind of squished together. And theurgy applies to what I do. I just learned that, guys. Some of you have been following me for over a year. You don't even know I don't know what that is. And I'm telling you guys deep mystical secrets. And some people accuse me of making it up because I don't know where it comes from in that sense. There's a word for when you have experiences as a kid and you learn things, or you've heard a story, or maybe read, maybe when I was in high school, I read, 3 paragraphs of Plato or something for a project for school, and forgot about it promptly, and then now I'm remembering it subconsciously, and I'm not remembering it actively, but there's parts of it coming through. That's probably true, but again, I have to be sincere. It's so hard to believe, but you have to believe when I'm telling you I'm being sincere. I don't study. I don't do it that way. I study by speaking to spirits, and I have them guide me. And then I'll see what pops up on YouTube the next day. I'll see what pops up in my algorithms. Or they'll just take me on a vision quest, and I will see some crazy shit. And then I have to research what they show me. So that's more like what happens. Maybe that's the best way to put it is, a spirit, like when I had my work with Amdusius, okay? If you watch that video, I ran into Selene, and I also got introduced to Lilith, I believe, and I know that for a fact now. And this kind of thing, I didn't know what I was dealing with. I didn't know who Selene was. I had to look it up. You think an occultist who's got this many followers knows this stuff because they've opened 1,000 books and they're a bookworm. I'm not a fucking bookworm. I've never been a bookworm. I hate doing it that way. Not to say that I never read. I used to read, fiction occasionally. I've read several big books in my life. I've read Dune cover to cover 20 times, but I don't study things. Okay, it's just not how I roll. All right, I want to get off the studying topic. Okay, I see some people are asking questions in small print, so I am going to have to lean in. Not sure whether you've touched on this in any of your videos so far, but are there any experiences have you had with Astaroth? Not yet. Very limited. Astaroth is one I've kind of kept on the back burner because I've always just been distracted, like, ooh, shiny, other spirit I want to work with. Astaroth I know is a feminine entity, and I'll give you a little bit of gnosis here that a lot of people know, but not a lot of people talk about. The Ars Goetia is essentially a listing of mostly gods and folk spirits from the Western traditions that the Christians, in their limited capacities of open-mindedness, saw as bad guys, because the Bible spoke of Baal as bad. They spoke of all, and Balaam is a prophet if you look in the Bible. These people and beings and entities and spirits were considered evil, okay? But they were pagan gods or folk spirits or folk legends that were real entities. Don't misunderstand me. But they were turned into demons for the pleasure of the Christian tradition. So you could argue that I am a form of pagan, although I don't like that term because I don't have pagan worship practices. Rather, I see those entities as real spiritual consciousnesses, I always get that wrong, spiritual consciousnesses that are part of a theurgistic perspective where to help me with my enlightenment and my ascension, to be myself, basically, to be a God form, requires the infusion of divine energy in the form of disembodied spirits, if you will. So I will invoke these spirits to work with me, teach me things. They'll show me visions. They'll show me things. They will help me. You'll notice that my channel is not as much about magic as it is theurgy. Now that I know that term, I'm going to use it up like it's the last of my toilet paper over here. Theurgy to me is the higher practice. It's a practice that I enjoy. That's high magic, and that's what I prefer. That's not to say I never do magic for smaller, low things, for non-spiritual things. It just means it's not my focus. You'll catch me doing a ritual for like prosperity or a certain result in a situation like less than once a month. I mean, it's rare. I don't really do that kind of magic much. Not that I can't, not that I don't know it. But I would prefer to work with the spiritual entities for personal development of psychic ability, spiritual understanding, vision questing, those kinds of things. And that is what most of my work is, if you're following my channel to start with. But Astaroth, getting back to your question, there are many spirits in the Goetia that were female gods. Okay, let's be honest. I can give you a handful right off the top of my head. You have Beleth, which is Belet, and Belet is the same as Baal, and that is a title for a divine spirit in the Mesopotamic cultures. You know, Baal was Lord, Belet was lady. So Belet, there's different ones. There's Belet Citri, I think it was. There's a whole bunch of different Belets. And Belet in the Goetia, just like Baal in the Goetia, is kind of like a... you can either use it to invoke one specific Baal or Belet, or you can specifically reach out towards all of them that would have been given that title. So it's kind of complex to explain. This is why when I did my initial work with Baal, I had a hard time pinning him down, because I saw Baal Hadad, I was actually seeing Baal Lamon, I was seeing all of these different Baals that were popping into my mind, and I was getting a little nutty, and I had to pick one to work with, and I settled on Baal Hadad for a while. Now Astaroth, or Astarte, is a female spirit. Okay, and when I say female, I don't mean like sex gender. I mean spiritual energy. It's yin energy. Okay, it is receptive spiritual energy, but they have a masculine component. This is why they can appear as any gender. It has nothing to do with anything. But if you work with Astarte or Beleth, actually the funniest experience I had was with Beleth, where when I first worked with Beleth, I was expecting a masculine spirit because, as I said, I don't study these things until I've experienced them, I guess. And the first time I worked with Beleth, I was working with just the Goetia. I called upon this spirit, and I offered to allow it to become invoked it into me, essentially, with my limits, and then I brought them in more and more. And as I did, I started affecting a very feminine posture. I started pantomiming feminine activities as I was channeling and writing things, and I'm moving around like with my hand on my hip, and I'm like, wow, this is a really effeminate like male spirit. This is really kind of cool and weird, and all, it was kind of fun, and I felt it was just like a cool feeling. And then I got like this weird boing like in my head, like, this is a female, this isn't a guy. It's okay if I see it as a female or a guy, but this is an effeminate energy. This is as much as it's powerful, and don't misunderstand some of you who are sexist out there. Feminine things are very powerful, and this is very powerful force that I'm feeling, but it's feminine. It caught me off guard, because Christians, they masculinize everything. They don't believe that spirits can be female because they're retarded. So that was new to me, and I had like that moment of like, holy shit, and I wrote everything down. I did all my work, and I asked, should I treat you as Belet from antiquity, or should I continue working with you as Beleth? And I was told with no uncertain terms that if I want to work with Beleth, that's perfectly fine. Because what you have to understand, these are masks that they wear, just like you wear the name Bob, Joe, Mary, Sue. They wear this mask, and they're fine with it because they can still work, you know what I'm saying? They can still use that mask to work with you, and it's fine. It's just really up to you to be sincere in your search to work with them. Let's see. So when I do work on Astaroth, I will definitely make a video. Another example that I'll give is a little bit more controversial is Asmodee. And Asmodeus, Ashimedeva, Ashima, okay, if you go back far enough, was actually a female goddess of fate, and was represented. There's not much known about her because she was only mentioned like once in the Bible, and there's a little snippets here and there in like pottery and shit. But the best they know about this spirit was that it was a female goddess of fate, and its symbol was something. Pardon me, I got the hiccups from dinner. Was a shaven sheep, something like that, shaven ram or a shaven sheep. So over time, with the way that the Judeo-Christian current tends to demonize the opposing spirits, and trust me, they all did it to each other. They weren't the only ones. As they demonized the spirits of the cultures that they came in contact with, and the Akkadians and all that, all the Akkadian and Mesopotamian spirits became bad guys. That is how you have this slow, lead up until you get to the Book of Tobit, which I guess is the earliest, biggest, I'll have to do more research, like I said, I don't study. I believe the Book of Tobit is when, the idea of Ashmedeva really comes about, where Asmodee really appears. And I guess it was a Zoroastrian demon before that, I guess. Actually, I should have said that first. It's not Solomon stuff. It was actually Zoroastrian before that. And these demonizations of these spirits just continues throughout history until you get to modern times, where we're so separated from all of this, we have no clue. And so we open up the Ars Goetia and we go, Asmodee, a masculine spirit who's riding on a dragon, who's this, that, and 6 other things, and will make you invincible. That sounds cool. Well, the funny thing is, in that context of making you invincible, when I worked with Asmodee and I've started to go back in history and find out the inspirations for this spirit, and you have to be careful with your syncretization. You don't want to syncretize everything so much that you lose function with the masks that you're working with. Don't make your focus on syncretization. I made that mistake. Don't do that. But occasionally they will allow you to see back into antiquity, to see where they came from, where they inspired things, to help you understand who they are now. But you have to remember, just like with people, you should be interested in who they are now more than who they were potentially. So just because someone was a convict maybe 20 years ago, you don't treat them as if they're still a convict. And in the same way, if a spirit is showing itself to you as, Asmodee and not Ashmedeva or, Ashima or whatever, you should work with what you're being shown, at least while you can. But I was shown enough that when I started to see this, then I saw, well, what does this invincibility in the Goetia mean then? Because, it's not invincibility like in a video game. This wouldn't have been in the mentality of the people who scried this information, whether they were making it up or not. Invincibility could be seen as, well, if Ashima was a goddess of fate, those people who function within the paradigm of their true intention, which is their fate, those people who follow their true intent and thus follow their fate are invincible. If you are doing intentionally, on purpose, what your truest, highest intention is to be, nothing is going to stop you. Because there's not fate like destiny. There's not like someone's decided for you where you're going to go in life. There is rather an intention, which is fated. There is this intention to be a certain person in a certain way, and if you resist that, you have suffering, and you have delays, and you have learning experiences. If you, on the other hand, follow that intention correctly, you'll still have suffering and learning experiences and problems, but you're going to see that nothing stops you. You're going to start to see that you have success. You're going to see that you are suddenly elevating, you're rising, you're ascending, which is exactly what started happening to me when I stopped fighting what I was. I spent too many years being a skeptic because I had already reached a high level of power, thought it must have been just a part of my insanity that I was going through, decided it wasn't real, and went full skeptic because it was a way to defend myself from what I was experiencing. Read Shadownomicon if you don't know what I'm talking about. When I hit 2018 and I got back into magic like this, it was like, the gates of hell opened up and I got sucked in and then shot back out all at once. All of this stuff started coming back to me. And since then, well, the proof is in the pudding. Follow my work. You'll know what I'm talking about. But as this happened, as I stopped resisting my path, as I stopped resisting my true self, or at least resisting it less, I'm sure I still resist it occasionally. As I aligned myself with my true intention, every door began to open to me. Living in poverty ended, I suddenly had a savings, a real savings, not just $100, $1,000, then two, and then enough that I can start a business, you know, that I can be comfortable. But I'm still making only minimum wage right now, by the way, because I quit my other day job. But I was meant to do that, okay? I was meant to be free so I can focus on this work. And by doing that, I've had nothing but success. People are my friends now. I look across the internet and I see a lot of awesome people who have enough discernment to know what to listen to and what not to listen to about what I'm saying, when to take me seriously, when to know I'm joking, people who will learn from what I'm talking about, not as I'm some kind of superior source, but that I'm a sincere source, and that what I'm experiencing is not coming from a need to prove to you that I am powerful. I'm not, you know, if I did have a criticism of certain people in the community, it would be that. It would be that everything that they do is a way to somehow show off to you that they're superior somehow. And a lot of them aren't, okay? What you see is what you get. I dress like this. Anybody who knows me knows that I go into public wearing clothes like these. I walk around town with my staff. This is my life. This is who I am. It's not just it is an act, okay? I'm going to be honest with you. It's an act. But the kind of act that it is a sincere act. This is a character I play so that I can be myself through the character. So this is the sorcerer, okay? And that is who I am invoking. And if you watch my content, you know, if you watch it long enough, you know I'm not making it up in that way. Okay, let's see. We've got a lot of, whew, you guys are very talkative, man. Wow. Let's go. That was the Astaroth question. I'm going to go buy a gas mask. Yeah, make sure you know how to fit it, dude. Don't just buy any old gas mask. It's not going to work. Oh, Son of Lilith, you're asking me how my experience with Lilith has going. Limited, because I do not believe in calling Lilith like I would, not to say that I call them forcefully, but I invite Lilith. There's a difference. And I invite all spirits, but with Lilith in particular, I don't know if she's also synonymous in some ways with the Morrigan. I don't know if there's a similarity, but there is to me a similar vibe in that you don't want to try to you don't want to say, Lilith, I'm calling you, where are you? You know what I'm saying? You want to light some incense for Lilith, and you want to say, Lilith, if it pleases you, I would enjoy your company right now. Unless she commands you to do something. And by command, it shouldn't be implied that she's superior to you. It is a command in that, you know, let there be this, please do this. You know, she'll inspire you. And I was inspired on the last full moon to do a working with her and Celine and some other spirits. And that went very well. It wasn't very moving. I didn't have like hyper visions or anything like that. It was more of just a way to acknowledge and honor them that night. But you guys who saw my stream from that night on Facebook saw I was a little wigged out, so I was definitely feeling it. But it wasn't like I got a lot of revelation that night. But another night that I was sort of sitting here doing meditations, I just lit some incense at my computer desk like I sometimes do, and I put on some binaural beats and I lay back and I just go into my trances and I go into my astral spaces, and as I'm sitting there, the incense is wafting and I smell it like really strong, and I open my eyes and it's coming at me like this, like going right at my face, and I was like, who is this? Because that felt like a spirit. I felt feelings on my face, and I asked who it was, and the first thought that I had was, I'm Lilith. I'm finally here, basically. You're finally seeing me, basically. Because I had kind of procrastinated working with her, because I kind of felt like I wasn't ready. I kind of felt like, just like with Belial when I first worked with him, I felt like I was going to do it wrong. And I took my time, and I didn't offend him, but I kind of got scolded by him for being a pussy about it. Lilith was more like, you know, she was so... You know, I sent you a message, Son of Lilith, about what I experienced, and you said it was very validated in what you would expect. And to me, I got this very strange, especially on the second working with her when I was in the moonlight. You know, there was this feeling of maternal energy from her, but it was kind of reptilian, if that makes sense. It was maternal, but it wasn't like a warm mammalian maternal feeling. It was more like, I laid your egg and now I'm here to see how well you've grown kind of feeling. And I often picture her as being, you know, covered in serpents and things. That's often how I visualize her. Whether that's right or not, that's what I see. And she has a very vampiric energy to me, a very, you know, but she can be a lot of things. And one of the things I don't like to do, I'll probably never do a demon in review about her, because I feel like one thing I don't feel is right with her is to define her too much for other people. I feel like She's the kind of entity where she wants to express herself to you as she is, and it's going to be whatever she wants you to see. And if you get too crazy about defining her, like I've seen people get into quarrels on Facebook about who she is and who is the true son of Lilith and all this bullshit. I've seen these arguments, and the people doing that are stupid. I feel like Lilith is like not liking that crap at all. More so than any other spirit I've seen people do that for. I feel like that's so insulting to do to Lilith. The amount of shit that people have done to Lilith over the eons is a little ridiculous. The amount of, she's like a scapegoat, like Azazel and Lucifer. She's very similar in that energy, and she gets blamed for so many things. And I'm not saying that she's a sweetheart. I think she's a force of nature, and forces of nature will blow your house down as much as they'll grow the trees that you make it out of. So hopefully that means something to you guys. Hopefully that's useful to you. But I probably won't do a demon in review on her, and if I do, I'm going to ask all of her permissions first. So let me scroll down. What do you think of doing Kundalini awakening? Well, you have to understand what Kundalini is, okay? You have to understand what some of this stuff is. In ancient Pali-Greek mythology, in ancient Indian lore, and all of that, they were all connected. And during the same period of 1000 BC to 0 CE, actually a few hundred years after, you get Neoplatonism and you get the more advanced stuff. There was a lot of cultural exchange, I believe, between Greece and India, and they pollinated each other with some amazing ideas. But a lot of these ideas actually have their origination in Egypt. And you have to understand that the imagery of the serpent, okay, it has a lot of different contextual meanings, but to the ancient world, the spirit was the symbol of the soul, the symbol of the spirit within, the symbol of, you'd dig up an anthill, okay? You'd dig up an anthill in antiquity, and a lot of times there'd be a snake in there, or a termite mound or something. You'd see a snake in there, and they don't know how it got in there, okay? And they don't know how it gets out, because it would have to get out and stuff. So it was kind of like this thing that they would find hidden within. But they also considered the serpent to be untraceable, untrackable. Unless you're in the desert, you don't track a snake. I don't know anybody who lives in the woods or goes out a lot. You don't really track a snake. They don't leave a trail, okay? They're really hard to follow. And in a very similar sense, the soul, the spirit, cannot be found. You can't find a soul or a spirit inside of you. You can't chop your body up. And this is going to be funny because I just got hit with this. You just told this guy you don't study things, and here you know all this stuff. I don't study things. I just know things because I pay attention. I don't know how else to put it. I don't read books. I don't follow traditions. I just get bored and I look stuff up. All right, maybe that is studying. Maybe I shouldn't say I don't study. Anyway, the serpent, this spiritual serpent, this energy, you see the serpent coming out of the eye of Ra. You see this serpent imagery. You see even in the Greco-Roman stuff, the serpent. There's a statue of Mary somewhere, I'm sure, with her foot on the serpent, keeping the serpent, keeping the serpent down, and all this other stuff. And the symbolism is so deep that I don't know it all. I have to do more research. But the serpent itself is the representation of the soul, the unfindable soul. So when we're talking about Kundalini, we're talking about the serpent that is coiled around your lower chakra, okay, your root chakra, and this idea that you need to raise it. That is raising this awareness is what you're doing. You're raising the awareness of your yin, of your passive, of your hidden self, of your hidden side, and you're raising this energy up through your energy body until it completes the connections. Now, why is this important? A lot of people don't realize, or maybe they know, but your energy body, as illusory as it is, has valid purpose. It has valid use as an energy body egregore. Your crown chakra and your root chakra are connected. They're completely connected through the void, I guess you could say. And by having your Kundalini raised, you're essentially empowering a more full transmission of your divinity through your biology, if you will. Now, I've never done Kundalini practice. That is to say, I've never done the yogic exercises, really. I've never followed it deeply. I've never felt the need. I don't think that anything is required to do these things. They're just methods. They're just principles. They're just practices you can use as ways to ritualize something that will happen on a path of spiritual enlightenment anyway. If you're enlightening yourself spiritually, if you're doing your work, if you are becoming aware of your divinity just by experiencing it, not by doing bibbidi-bobbidi-boo and reading books. It's by experiencing your divinity through those practices. Your kundalini's raising whether you're doing the practices or not. That's my opinion of it. And if you want to make it a focus practice, just like with chakra, if you make that a focus practice, you can gain a little bit of control over it. You can make it more conscious control. But you don't have to. You know, if we had to, human beings would never evolve on our own. You don't have to do any of this. You're doing this naturally as it is. That's my opinion from experience. Just like you don't have to make your heart beat to make yourself live. You don't necessarily have to force yourself to exercise if you're living a healthy life with a healthy mindset. So that's where I'll leave that, only because I don't want to go too far into dogmatic stuff like that. Let's see. Let me scroll down a little bit. Are there any experiences you had with Astaroth? We covered that. So twin flames. Okay, I see a lot of this with twin flames, which means that all are part of the same and we jump. The only problem I have with twin flames is that people use it as an excuse for, you know, a delusion of romance. Like they meet somebody and they go, "Oh, we must be twin flames. I must have you," and it creates an attachment. I don't believe in attachment like that. I think twin flames are probably people who've experienced each other before and they're aware of it somehow. But I don't like talking about twin flames. This is not something I'm really into, so I don't want to mess up anything that's true about it. I'm a regular Edgar Casey. You know what's funny is my friend, when I was in high school, if you read Shadanomicon, the guy Andreas that I talk about, the guy who died, he was the only one that I knew in my life that knew as much as the people that I know now, if that makes sense. This was a young man he ate, slept, and breathed all magic. He loved studying this stuff back to front. And he and I would talk, and I would just tell him my thoughts, and he'd go, "That's exactly like this person said. That's exactly like that person said." He's like, "Have you ever heard of Edgar Casey and his theory of Atlantis and all this?" And I'm like, "Never heard of him." He's like, "Well, you'd be really fascinated by it." So I never read him, but I am aware of who that is. He used to talk about it a lot because he was always interested in my Atlantis gnosis that I had, which was very vague. It was very fanciful. I didn't know how accurate those symbols were, though. And this is a tip for those of you doing this work. Most of what you're going to see is going to feel like fantasy. You've got to separate the fantasy from the symbolism it represents. The symbolism is what's important. You know, I had in my mentor class the other day, and I don't want to tell too much, this is her personal life, but she had a working with the spirit, and she got a vision of this spirit and some gnosis of this spirit. And I basically instructed her to seek out the core symbolism of what she was told. So if you're told something is an old spirit, if you're told something is a spirit of death, if you're told, you know, try to get to the core archetypes that they're showing you through the symbolism, and you're going to have a better time. If you have a vision and you take it as literal truth, like reading the Bible literally, you're going to have a bad time. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to get superstitious. What do you suggest to improve psychic reading power? What do I suggest to improve psychic reading power? Well, there's the obvious stuff. People say practice. That's obvious. But the practice really isn't practice like you're learning a skill. What you have to do to have any gift in anything that's reading oriented, you have to have faith in your reading. You have to trust that even the things that seem unlikely are still valid gnosis. It's just they might be symbolic, or they might be guiding you towards something that is a mistake so that you learn from it. That's a hard lesson, because we have been taught in our lives that, you know, we've been taught a very materialistic way of looking at the world, and we expect things to have cause and effect, to go from A to B. And if we ask a spirit to have an outcome, and that outcome doesn't match what we asked for, we feel like it's a failure, because we are limited in our capacity to understand that that failure taught us something very important about something. It gave us a new skill. It gave us a new belief. It gave us maybe an understanding of what is rational and what is not. And instead of seeing it always as a failure per se, you'll know it's a failure when you get dead air. That's failure. But if you do get some kind of synchronistic result, whether it's what you wanted or the exact opposite of. So the same thing applies to readings. When I do my readings, if you read my book, Become the Maelstrom, I do have a section on tarot, and my knack for tarot, I don't like to do cold readings. I like to talk to somebody, see them face to face for a little bit, and get an understanding of what their concerns are. Then I trust myself to do a reading. I'm not saying you can't do cold readings, I just don't trust them. When I do a reading, I will draw cards potentially, and I will look for an anchor card. And the anchor card is usually going to be in a position in the reading that is a base position. You know, I guess what's the normal spread people use? What is it, the Celtic cross or something? I forget. They often have a card that represents the querent, okay? Well, any reading has a card that can best represent something that is knowable. So if you're doing a past, present, future reading, the past or present should be an anchor card. One of those should be an anchor card. And what I mean by an anchor card is it should be something where when you look at that card and the querent is there with you and you're working with them and you say, this card means this. If they go, ooh, yeah, that sounds right. Or you get that feeling because you know your situation or their situation well enough, that's your anchor card. And when you've got your anchor card, you can probably trust the rest of the reading. The question is, when you interpret the cards, don't be literal. I hate when people get literal about the cards. They bust out the book or they memorize it. Fuck what the book says. Look at the cards. This is why I like expressive cards like Anna Kay. I love the Anna Kay deck because she takes all the symbolism of the old... the Rider-Waite's and makes them pretty and really expressive to modern eyes. If you look at Anna Kay's deck, it is to me the most, especially if you're an empath in any way, shape, or form, the faces are so expressive. You know what the card's telling you. The only problem with that is, compared to, say, the Crowley deck, you know, Crowley's Thoth deck, when you look at that deck, there's so much more occult symbolism going on in there, stuff I don't know anything about because I don't study deeply. If you look at that deck, there's so much more room there for you to scry the card and get extra tidbits. So some people swear by those cards, and for good reason. I like Anna Kay because of the way I do my work. Is I don't need the cards really. I have them available for someone when they ask. If they say, please do a reading for me with cards, I'll do a reading for them. You know, if they're a paying client or something, sure. But not always. Sometimes I'll deny it. I'll say I don't need the cards to tell you what I see, because what I see is, you know, again, it's one path empathy, it's one part empathy, it's one part spiritual intuition, and even when I'm wrong, you know, my telling you something has validity. And when I do my readings, if you watch The Matrix, and I'm not trying to pump myself up, but if you watch The Matrix, when he goes to see what's her name, the Oracle, and she tells him, you know, he says, "Am I the one?" She says, "I'm sorry, Neo. I guess it's just not your thing." That was, you know, she was wrong, right, by saying this, but that was what he needed to hear to do what he had to do. So sometimes when someone's doing readings, and it sounds like you're covering your butt when you say that until you have the proof in the pudding of the people coming back to you, telling you, yeah, what you told me still made it work for me. When you told me that, I understood what it meant, and I get it now. So my tips for readings is very simple. Trust your intuition. Trust what you're doing. Scry into whatever system you're using. If you're using tarot, scry the cards. Don't just don't just pull the card and look at it and say, well, this card means this, and throw it down. Take that card and study the card while you're studying the querent and feel the energy, feel the things. Look for anything that corresponds to what you're seeing. Use your sorcerer's gaze. Look through the card, literally. Hold it so that you can see through it, literally. And gaze that card, and you will feel something. You'll get twinges of intuition, and don't be afraid to be wrong. If you're doing this sincerely, if you're really reading, you're being sincere with the person you're reading, because if you're not, you're a fucking asshole and you shouldn't be doing it. I'm sorry to put it that way. You should be honest with the person. They're trusting you with their spiritual energy. And I'm not a moralist, but I'm telling you, if you're doing it the other way around, you're giving us a bad name, okay? And that pisses me the fuck off. If you're not being sincere in your reading and you're not telling them the things you don't understand, if you're not telling them I don't fucking get it when you don't get it, if you're trying to be right, you're going to be wrong. You have to trust the wrong parts too. You have to talk about that to your querent, and especially to your fucking self. Sorry to curse you out. I'm not cursing you specifically, but I'm being stern here. When you're doing your own readings, be honest with yourself. Look at those cards and be like, is this just my wishful thinking happening in this card reading? So that's the best advice I can give you. We all need Magneto helmets. Yeah, right. Oh man. Let's see. Oh man, you guys have been chatting away. Holy cow. All right, let's see. Good question, Creature of Legend. Very good question. I don't know if you're still watching. It's been a little while since you posted that. Give me 1 second. David Morgan also made an interesting comment, but I want to go to Creature of Legend. So you said, why do you work with the demonized versions of them and not the original pagan ones? I wouldn't say it's black and white like that. I do, but I work with the demonized faces because they're inspiring to me. You have to understand that the spirits are not victims of this demonization. The spirit world is not, they're not offended by it, okay? You are offended by it. They're not offended by it. And I don't mean you personally. I'm saying, you know, you as a human being would be offended by it potentially. They're not. They don't get offended the way we do over petty, stupid things. You call them a dirty name, it doesn't piss them off. It's the energy of the disrespect that might make them adversarial to you, yes. But they're not petty, okay? So when Christians demonize them, what you don't understand is that they immortalize them. By demonizing them, they continue to talk about them. And what they demonized was they created this mask that still was inspired by them. It was still inspired demonization. When you work with these beings, you will be led towards enough truth of their archetypal truth, because it's still in there if you look. This is how you can find them. You know, I wish I could explain it better than that. But if you look for them, like what I would do is I would get a big book of gods and a big book of demons. And that's about the only studying I've done with this. You take the two books and you open one, you open the other, and you compare the names and you find them where they were. You find a syncretized version of them. And you will find what things match and what things don't. And then you work with the damn spirit. That's the most important thing, okay? I always tell people, if you're studying the spirits, you're not working with them. If all you're doing is opening up a book and trying to read everybody's experience with that spirit before you work with them, if you're sitting on the, you know, if you're sitting on the pot and you're not shitting, basically, if you're standing on the edge of the diving board, dipping your toe in, you just won't jump, but you're studying the pool for days and you're not working with them, then you're doing it wrong. What you should use is a very small snippet of information, something that gives you enough of a vision in your mind, something that begins to, you can start visualizing what you're going to work with, and then go into your ritual, okay? So I find that Ars Goetia by itself is just about enough. Sometimes I look up just a little bit more, but I start with that and I go with that, and then they lead me into these pagan histories. And when I ask them, can I work with, what should I work with? They say, work with whatever you want. Our demonic form is just fine because it is there. When you see my work about the infernal realms, you'll understand. But these beings, they are multifaceted, guys. These are egos. These are ego masks, okay? And they're interchangeable. The true consciousness behind all of these beings, okay, individuated and centralized, is such that these are masks and you can work with any one of them that you want. Even the ones that sometimes appear to conflict, but that's a higher level study that I'm not going to talk about because that's something later. But when you're talking about these spiritual beings, you're talking about, say, Baal, for example. You're talking about Baal, okay, from the Goetia. If you work with that spirit long enough and you're sincere in your work, you will be led to Baal Hadad. You will be led to that original space. And I actually prefer Baal Hadad to Baal. I don't work with Baal. I don't work with that spider thing with the frogs and the bullshit. That's actually, whether they realized it or not, when they did that, when they made that chimera, when they did that, they were actually showing that Baal was meant to represent all of the Baal deities in that way. That's why it's got all these goofy appearances, and some of the symbolism is there. Not all of it. Some of it I don't know, because we're talking about medieval symbolism. We're talking about, you almost have to be a historian a little bit and go back to, become someone who studies medieval history and understand the culture of what it would have meant to have a frog and a cat and a this as a head, okay? But you tear out the obvious metaphors and go for the deeper symbolism between the lines, you start to find them. And what I'm basically getting at is, even those pagan gods, okay, you have to unscrew this idea from your mind that those gods existed as gods. They're entities, they're consciousnesses of the omniverse, if you will, that are in league with humanity. They're close enough to us in consciousness in terms of the reality they agree upon, that when you become aware of them, they inspire us to do things, and we inspire things about them because it's a co-creative event. We're not islands unto ourselves as much as I'm making it sound. You have the power to give them any mask you want, and they will inspire you to give them masks that they're willing to wear. And the ancients would have invoked and worked with these spirits. Imagine cavemen, right? I tell this story once in a while. We'll take Malthus as a good example. Imagine there's cave people, and this is, 10,000 BC, 20,000 BC, whatever, before Atlantis, before all that. And there's these people dwelling in caves, and they don't have a brain, they don't have 10 brain cells between them. And they're foraging, they're living their lives, they're screwing, they're hunting and gathering. And this one little boy takes a bump on the head, and he's kind of lost his, his rational wits, but he gets visions now because of this. His inhibitions are gone. And he starts having these visions and things. And he has a vision of a crow, and a crow calling to him. And so, he can't explain it, but he feels drawn to crows, and the tribe, the cave tribe, whatever it is, they're starving. It's been a long winter. They didn't have enough stuff buried that they can eat. They've been starving. And one day the little boy goes out into the wilderness after having one of these visions. He wakes up early. He had a weird dream. He goes out. He's starving. He's delirious. He's visualizing crows, and he starts hearing crows in the distance. And so he walks into the woods, and he comes upon a bunch of crows eating on a carcass of a caribou or something. And he knows that that's a fresh enough kill that if he gets the adults, they're going to eat. So he goes home, and he gets them to come, and they get the caribou, and they ask him, how did, Boo-Boo, how did you know? How did you find this? What happened? You shouldn't have left the cave, whatever. And he'll talk about his dream and how he saw the crows that he was dreaming about. And they'll be like, wow, let's go, maybe this is something special, and they'll deify this crow mask. But there's a spiritual component behind that inspired that vision to happen. And over time, this kid will develop into the shaman of the crow for the tribe. They will develop their religion based around this. This will develop millennia after millennia after millennia, until you have every culture in the world has an idea of what the crow god, crow spirit, crow entity is. Okay, there's a crow in every culture in the world. So it's not that everybody sees it basically the same way too. All right, let's see. So these gods that we're talking about, all of them existed as consciousness before that, but the masks we apply to them, these deific masks, or I think somebody told me recently that Michael W. Ford called them, what do you call them, demonic masks or something? I don't remember what he called them. Oh, I think he did call them deific masks. I think I am borrowing his term. I call them egregoric masks. I had no idea that he did that, and then somebody told me that. See what I'm talking about? So when you realize that these are masks that they wear for us to be easily interacted with, then once you understand that, you start to see past the mask, and you no longer feel attached to it. So when you ask, why don't you work with the pagan version? Because the pagan version is no longer what I need. The pagan version never appealed to me when I heard about it the first time. When I was a kid and I heard about Baal Hadad, I was like, yeah, fucking a cow god, that's cool. It didn't really appeal to me. But when I picture the demonized version, oh, this big dark, bull with, blood, oh, this is cool. Now I'm suddenly inspired to work with it. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a reason why there's 31 flavors of ice cream at Baskin-Robbins, guys. You're meant to enjoy them all, okay? You're meant to find the one that you like. And the same thing happens with the spirit world. All right, let's see. I'm starting to lose my voice, and I got a whole bunch of... I got 2 mentor classes tomorrow, so I may have to cut this short without answering the rest of your questions. Let's see. Yeah, Alpha Draconia made a good point. You should be doing tarot for yourself. Yeah, I do agree primarily, but people will ask, and tarot is a medium, and it's not a fact, if that makes sense. That's why they call it they call it a medium. They call it a way to divine things. You're actually the one that has the sight, not the cards. So don't pretend that the cards do anything. Okay, the cards are an excuse for your intuition to kick in, and the fact that the cards come up in mysterious ways with the way they're supposed to be, that is magical. I'm not denying it. Diamond and Teddy, you're awesome. I don't know if you're still here. You said, does that serpent need all that toilet paper? I'm glad someone else noticed it. Ooh. All right, guys, I'm having a little trouble focusing on all these different comments. Listen, I think I'm going to call it for the night. I think I'm going to say I talked enough. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I want to do something other than this. I got to ground out now or start writing or something. And I appreciate you guys showing up. I appreciate it. It's been, almost a 2-hour session, so my voice is almost shot. But I appreciate you guys. You know, I want to make sure that you guys know that through all of this stuff, I'm going to be here doing my thing, and I understand that people's ability to support me financially may wane a little bit for a little while. Just understand that I am doing this professionally now. I am a content creator professionally. I am a writer. My books sell, but they're not going to sell as well because of this thing going on. Apparently, they're not going to be delivering certain books. So I don't know for sure if they're going to stop delivering books. They might not have a problem with that. I think they're just not shipping things between warehouses. So I think that just means if you're local enough to get a shipment directly from their printing press, it'll be fine. But I don't know for sure. But the stuff is all available on Kindle. If you can see your way to support me through this, it would help, but it's not required. I'm comfortable and capable of surviving this so long as it doesn't last forever, so long as it's not, bad for years. But if it's bad for a month or so, I'll be fine. But I appreciate you guys. You guys coming here, and even when you ask me tough questions, or maybe you don't believe what I'm saying, maybe you're asking me questions because you're testing me, or maybe you trust what I'm saying and you love my work. I appreciate you guys coming here and having fun with me, because in a lot of cases, I'd love to just hang out with some of you guys. I would love to not have a screen between us. I'd love to do a group meetup, and maybe someday I'll do that soon. Once this all pans away, maybe this fall. I got enough followers and fans now. It's realistic to expect, a dozen people or so may show up. If I do a get-together in Philadelphia or Manhattan or something, it wouldn't be that unreasonable to expect. So I do appreciate you guys, and I'm going to be here for as long as I can have interesting things to talk to you guys about. So this is my profession now, and I appreciate your help. I'm trying to think of things to say to close it out, but if you do want to support my work, just check the description. There's links to my books, my Patreon, and of course, like and share, especially share this video. I think we talked about some cool stuff, but don't be surprised if they take this video down, because I dared to say coronavirus like 4 times during it, and I definitely called out their bullshit, so they may try to squash it. And I'm not going to be going long, guys. This week, I'm sort of taking it easy, and I just felt like spur of the moment. I had to do a stream. I wanted to connect with you guys. With everything that's going on, I want to connect with you guys and have fun with you guys and do a little visual gag with the toilet paper and my shotgun. And, this is actually not a fireplace. I know it sounds like one. I'm actually streaming a fireplace sound effect, and I have a lamp with a fireplace bulb in it. So it's actually flickering like a real fireplace. So, I really appreciate you guys, and I guess I'm going to sign off. If you guys have any other questions or you want to ask me something, I'm on Facebook. I don't always reply because I get hundreds of them a day sometimes, but usually it's only just like a dozen, so you can definitely ask me a question, and if it's something that I feel like I can answer or if I have the time for, I will. But until next time, there'll be stuff coming out this week. I have Demon in Reviews planned. I want to do Balaam in particular. I've got to do him. I really got to do Person, but Person I don't have as close a relationship with. I've only worked with him a few times, and I don't want to put out stuff unless I have something meaningful to contribute. But Balaam I do. There's a lot of spirits I could talk about, but I'm also working through something right now I'm writing it as I'm working through it, if that makes sense. So that'll be exciting. I'll be revealing more of that as I do it, unless I skip it for a little while because of what's going on. But all right, guys. All right, let me see what people are saying. All right, let's see. All right. So thank you, guys. You can start tuning out now. I'm going to hit that button in just a second. But make sure you like this video. Make sure you share it. And I'll see you soon, okay? Mind the shadows.